Here we are in the Foxhole, Seattle, Washington, surrounded by people who don't want us to speak.
Indeed.
Lori, how you doing today?
Doing great.
Yeah.
What fun.
I know. We are finally doing what we talked about for weeks now.
For weeks,
And
yes.
It's exciting.
This is a celebration.
It is a celebration. Yeah, we were on the winning side, and that carries with it a certain responsibility. And
absolutely.
Now we have to continue on as victors and continue the momentum that we built up to there to win the election for President Donald J. Trump.
That's why I'm glad that we're getting this off the ground as quickly as we are, so that we don't lose any of this momentum and all of the supporters that we have in this state.
Yeah, that's right. As we'll get into a little bit later, you and I were part of having to put that whole puzzle together in an area where conservatives, libertarians, basically anybody but liberals and Democrats are severely under fire.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And we were under intense pressure this entire past year. And so to have come out as victors is a sweet victory indeed. And to see the thousands of people that we had come on board in Washington State was thrilling. And we don't want to lose those folks.
1.2 million. 1.2 million voters for Donald J. Trump in a state that is supposed to be nothing but progressives, liberals, social justice warriors. And yeah, that didn't quite turn out to be the case, did it?
Not at all. But we knew it.
I think my favorite part of election night was that period of time where Seattle hadn't been counted yet. And Washington was showing as a red state, and I really thought people were going to just spontaneously explode.
About to combust, for sure.
They didn't quite understand. So yeah, we got a lot to go over. To our viewers, welcome to the Foxhole Report. This is a brand new thing that we're doing. Lori and I worked on the campaign for Donald J. Trump for president in 2016. And we really want to continue our work to bring people together who don't fit into the binary left-right paradigm. And I think that the people that we met throughout this entire process are very, very off the standard political chart.
Absolutely.
And I think you yourself, I think you were one of the ones who was a former Democrat, former liberal.
I was never a Democrat.
Oh, okay.
And I never identified myself as liberal either. I definitely with activist leanings. I got out of that before the whole social justice warrior movement happened, but I worked for the Green Party. I worked for Ralph Nader. I had left leanings for sure.
So you worked for the Green Party as well. I was actually doing some work for the Green Party before Mr. Trump came calling. I saw it as a way to kind of interface in a city where, really, unless you're some flavor of progressive, you just don't really exist.
Right.
I don't know about you, but I felt extremely betrayed when all of a sudden Jill Stein was carrying water for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, after all that she said about Hillary Clinton.
Right. And I met Jill Stein myself in person a couple times. In the spring, I actually raised some money for her. And honestly, I'm asking myself, what the hell did I do that for? All the things that I thought I understood about the Green Party as being a political alternative that's separate from the big Democrat machine. Oh, well, all of a sudden there they were.
Right.
Trying to get Hillary in. And I felt like the narrative just
I think Jill Stein would have countered you and said that she wasn't doing that for Hillary Clinton's benefit. But the thing that she'll never admit that it was a PR stunt.
Right.
For her and for the Green Party. And it just shows you how astray the Green Party has gone since the late 90s when Ralph Nader sort of begrudgingly accepted their nomination. And then in 2004, he did not, for reasons such as what we are seeing from them now.
Right. Yeah. And when I listened to Patrick Moore, who's one of my favorite people, and he was one of the co-founders of Greenpeace, he kind of indicated the same thing. Everything was great, and we had this excellent mission going for a while, and then all of a sudden, as he put it, Greenpeace left the side of science.
Yeah.
And I think that you're seeing more and more of that from lots of parts of the left and lots of people that are claiming to be the good guys. they're just not doing anything important at this stage other than raising money for themselves.
They're not at all. They're led around by their emotions, and they've left behind all rational thought and any sort of logical foundation on which their parties and their platforms were ever built. And that's why I got away from it back in the early 2000s. I could see that it was tail spinning into emotional drama.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I just watched an excellent documentary by, I don't know if you've ever seen anything by Adam Curtis. He's
I have not.
The BBC documentarian. And I don't agree with a lot of his conclusions, but he's an excellent, excellent documentarian. And he just did one called Hypernormalization. Mm-hmm. And in it, he describes how the left sort of just retreated into art and,
yes.
into spaces that took them off of the political battlefield. And then he explains the effect of Facebook, which the way Facebook changed and started to filter everything that we saw on Facebook in order to show us more of what we liked.
Right.
And the effect that had was to create a feedback loop. So therefore, all of the progressive folks, all they heard from was other progressive folks.
Right.
And Facebook made sure that they weren't troubled by any posts that would challenge their beliefs.
Right.
And so I think there's a lot of ingredients that lead to the place we're at now, where you've got all of these people, especially in this city, running around going, what the hell just happened to me?
Right.
And they don't understand. Everything they were told was proven false. They were told Donald Trump could never be elected president. They were told that lots of things were true that proved to be absolutely false. So I've got a feel for folks like that right now who are just trying to figure out where the hell reality is.
And you have to wonder if they're truly trying to discern where reality is, or if they are retreating into their safe spaces and having emotional breakdowns, which when we talk about emotional breakdowns, we can talk about Kanye West here in a few minutes. But I feel like that's where a lot of these folks are right now. They're self-soothing, and they're in their recursive echo chambers of Facebook and Twitter and their friends. And I still find that they're not willing to step outside of that to try to take a rational look at what has just happened.
Yeah, they're trying to find who's to blame.
Right.
They got the torches out, and they're trying to figure out who's responsible. And unfortunately, if you go down the list so far, it's been like recount, and now it's, Trump committed treason, and he's, worked with the Russians. And they're going through just about everything. I mean, listen to Nancy Pelosi. She says, there's nothing wrong with our message. We just weren't getting the message out to people. And I went, oh my God.
Wow.
Okay, so owning CNN and owning MSNBC and owning NBC and owning all these places where most people get their news wasn't enough.
Right.
They needed more than that.
Right.
And it just shocked me, the absolute lack of self-awareness or reflection or any sense of like changing the course, because obviously you had all the cards stacked on your side. Every possible advantage.
And what, 1.2 billion, I think, is what they said Hillary's final count was for the campaign spending?
Oh, yeah. She spent like probably 50% more, something like that, than Trump did. He did some interesting things. He spent very little, relatively speaking, on television. And he spent a lot on digital ads and the folks on the internet. So it was a lot more than just his personality or, people are racist and so they responded to Trump. There's a lot more going on. And I hope that the folks that think that it was just about racism and bigotry and white people actually do some homework and look for themselves to see there was some bigger things, there was some issues in play. Not to mention the fact that, as Mr. Trump said many times when he was on stage at a rally, he says, I'm just the messenger.
Right.
And our movement knows that we're not following as fanboys and fangirls of some rich guy. We're actually the ones telling him where to go and what to do and who to talk to. And I mean, just look at Giuliani and Mitt Romney. They are no longer in the picture.
Right.
And I attribute that largely to the fact that there was a huge backlash amongst the Trump base. I think if you want to learn about what happened with the Trump movement, just go and study how outspoken they've been since he was elected.
Yes.
Towards him.
Yes.
And I don't think he's really been dealing with anybody more outspoken than his own people
Right.
since the election. So I think that really shows that this isn't a bunch of followers. This is a movement involving philosophy. This is a movement involving a sense of, hey, we're your boss.
Yes.
You do what we say, not the other way around.
And I think that we've all intuited that, or many of us have intuited that about him from the beginning. And that's why we continue to put all of our efforts and our trust in his movement, because we knew that about him. And I think that, we've talked about this before, I think that's why he airs so much of what he does in public on Twitter or on Facebook, so that he can get the feedback from his followers.
I think he loves it.
Yeah.
I think he loves being directly connected. And I think that what you're seeing right now is the end of the old school news model where only certain people are allowed to be in the White House and get certain
Right.
information. If you're not on that list, then, he's just kind of going around all that. And it's a kind of an amazing concept. I honestly hope that the rallies continue beyond the just thank you tour. I would love to see him do this on a regular basis for, just addressing the people.
I think he will. I think that he gets so much from it on so many different levels that I think he'll find it hard to rip himself away from his followers. I think he's incredibly energized by being around his followers and by hearing from them and just by the crowds. I mean, I could sense that whenever we saw him at the rally in Everett.
Sure. Oh, the man's 70 years old.
That's hard to believe.
And
yeah.
you watch him bounce around throughout this entire process, and he was doing what in the home stretch? How many rallies per day?
Five and up to, I think 5 and 6 a day.
And he's just on it. He doesn't look tired.
Yeah.
He doesn't look like he's overwhelmed by the process. He looks like he's having fun.
Yeah.
One tough sucker.
I felt like I was watching a completely different version of this process when I was watching him go through it. And that was exciting too.
Well, it's because he's not a politician. I don't think that in at least in our lifetimes. I mean, I'm sure that there were guys in the past, but that we've ever watched someone who is not a politician run for office at the level that he did. I mean, we're seeing something unprecedented, historic, and absolutely outside of the norm. And that's part of the fun, is to just watch everyone cringe that we're encroaching upon their social mores by doing things so differently.
Oh yeah, and the headline. And this idiotic press who we're now, we're kind of filling in the void for that they left open with their just terrible job of so-called journalism. I think the headline I saw today was like 18 ways that we can fight to preserve our LGBTQ. What's the list of this word?
Soup.
Our rights to be gay. And I just went, well, hang on. Did this author even listen to what he said after the terrible shooting in Orlando? Because frankly, his words at the rally immediately following that terrible event were really the most heartfelt, like genuine response to it. And I think that day he said, I was going to talk about Hillary, but I'm not going to talk about Hillary. I'm just going to talk about, this terrible thing that happened and how can we come together and prevent these things from happening in the future.
Right.
And was incredibly, I thought compassionate towards that movement and that category of person. I never thought any of the like homophobia stuff and the anti-LGBT stuff had any substance whatsoever.
It never did. No, it never did. I mean, come on. He used to hang out at Studio 54. He doesn't have any issues against gays. I mean, this is all stuff that's just drummed up from the left to try to smear and to try to continue the indoctrination of the social justice warrior movement, which is easily swayed because they are a unified voice. They're groupthink. They have no ability, they don't. Not that they don't have the ability. They just don't have the impetus to step outside of their little group and read anything or listen to anything that's not sanctioned by their group leaders.
Echo chamber.
Yeah,
they're in their echo chamber, and that's something I thought about as well in terms of our opposition here. And now that we're done with political for the time being, now it's largely cultural. But when you think about the supposed foot soldiers of the left and how they've been basically trained to like look for mama anytime anything is trouble, Well, how in the world are you going to turn that into any kind of threat to anybody else? I mean, they're basically like we saw, like they have a bad day and they get together by the thousands and cry.
Right.
So honestly, I think if good people are getting together and showing initiative and actually getting things done, it's a bit of a paper tiger. I don't think that there's going to be much of a resistance, to be honest, other than the crappy headlines that will come out until those companies go bankrupt.
Crappy headlines and a lot of noise. And it's just a matter of just tuning out the white noise right now and getting to work, because we do have a lot of work to do.
Oh, but didn't you hear it's the Russians?
It is the Russians.
The Russians!
For God's sake, the Russians are getting ready to hit us with a Siberian polar blast, too, here in Seattle. Can you believe it?
It's all the Russians.
Those Ruskies.
They installed Trump. Didn't you hear that?
They did.
Putin flew him in, dropped him out of a helicopter with the red, white, and blue cape on. He didn't think anyone would notice.
Yeah. Exactly.
But those crack reporters are right on it. Well, it's interesting because now you've got the CIA kind of involved in this.
Well, it's not just, so the CIA is involved, but the department that oversees the CIA does not agree with the CIA necessarily. They're certainly not going to approve of what the CIA said. They're saying that there's no substantial proof, and that the CIA shouldn't be saying this at this point.
Yeah, and I haven't dug into it deeply because I've been kind of focused on our first show. But apparently the FBI is taking a very different posture.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing from certain circles, from certain people whose names might rhyme with Alex Jones, that there's a bit of a coup going on, that there's actually kind of a power struggle between the CIA and the FBI right now. It's kind of interesting. It seemed clear that there was at least some will at the FBI to see Donald Trump as president based on what happened.
Well,
they certainly weren't applying any resistance. Let's just say that. So we'll have to see how all this pans out. We're going to have, I think, a lot of surprises in Washington, D.C. over the course of the next month and a half as they kind of shake things out. Have you been following the picks so far?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Following the what?
I think that was taking off in his car. That totally worked, by the way.
What? Oh.
Screech.
Sorry.
That's
okay.
That came through onto
You have to take that out.
It's all right. We're all playing with the soundboard today. But I'm curious, if you've been kind of following that, because that's
cabinet picks?
Yeah, that hasn't
yeah.
been totally on my. So go ahead and just tell us a bit about that for a minute. What you've been seeing, who you liked, who you haven't liked, and what sort of hijinks has the press been up to with all this? Because when I first saw it, it was like, oh, he interviewed Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney is the next,
Right.
Secretary of State, and,
Right.
and they're just frothing at the mouth at every single chance. But so, what were you seeing?
Well, what we've been seeing, I think, this whole time is just the press being apoplectic at every single mention of any name up for any cabinet pick. And at some point, they've cried wolf so many times that no one's going to listen anymore. And going back to what I said, I think Trump does is he does everything so publicly so that he can get the feedback of his supporters. And I also think that he's enough of a businessman that no matter what he does, he's going to make the best decision, no matter who it is. I didn't know a lot about Rex Tillerson, but of course, after his name started coming up, I started doing some investigating. I knew who he was, but I didn't know that much about him. And I have to say, I'm impressed. I'm impressed with this man. Rex Tillerson is the pick for Secretary of State, and that was announced this morning. And I'm impressed with him for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is he went to work for Exxon when he was a young man, straight out of college, and he stayed with it his entire life. I think he's 62 now. So he has made this a lifelong career. In 2010, he served as president of the Boy Scouts of America. I mean, those are just a few little things that I find impressive, besides running the largest company in the world. He has to have some really incredible geopolitical savvy to be able to run that company as successfully as he has. And if we look at the Secretary of State's position, if we look at Americans like shareholders, I mean, he's done right by his shareholders, right, for ExxonMobil. And if we look at if we look at this in a very pragmatic sense, as we are the shareholders in this country, I think that he's a great pick. I think he's going to do right by us.
Yeah, so there was also a gentleman from Hardee's, which started off as Carl's Jr., and that
Right.
was a fast food chain that actually began right next to where I was born in Santa Barbara, California.
Is that right?
Yeah, they were in Carpinteria, and they actually just fled California because the tax situation had become so unbearable they couldn't stay
Access denied.
where they began. And I've heard, of course, some of these comedy artists in the press are like, "Oh, we got a fast food guy who's going to, tell us about labor." Well, who better than somebody that's been dealing with the impacted, classes of America and giving them their first jobs in a lot of cases, or getting them off the streets in a lot of cases, or whatever. I mean, this is a person who has actually seen the realities
Right.
of labor, on that level. And so I thought it was a really interesting pick. What else do you know about this guy?
It's also a very interesting pick. So what I know about him, I mean, one of the first things I heard was derision from Richard Spencer. We know Richard Spencer is
Was he the white supremacist guy?
Well, I don't think he would label himself as a white supremacist. He's a white nationalist.
Well, we're all racist, right?
Yeah, we're all racist.
Have you accepted
so
your racism gracefully yet?
I'm working on that.
Okay.
I have a daily mantra, so I'm working on that for acceptance of my.
I'm trying really hard too. I've always had black and brown friends, so this is all new to me.
And my black and brown friends think that this is all insanity. Yeah. But that's okay. Don't ask the people who are supposedly those that are oppressed for their opinion.
Right.
Let's just worry about what the opinions of other white people are. So Puzzler Spencer was saying that he was Mr. Open Borders. So I went and started researching that, and I couldn't really find any evidence of that. In fact, what I did find was a most recent interview that he gave back in, I believe it was in October, gave an interview about the problems with illegal immigration and how it's affecting the American labor force here, and how we have to secure our borders because it's driving down wages for the American workers. So I couldn't find any evidence of what Spencer was alleging, but that's one of the only things that I've really heard. Other than he's done a great job with running his company and has been there for his laborers and has built a great company.
Sure. Well, they really did start as a little burger stand and built it all the way up, and then bought Hardee's, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's how it went. So that's another, American success story that we can look at and say, oh, wow, maybe this person knows a thing or two about making this place successful. So I liked it. Anybody else that you had a read on?
Well, Scott Pruitt's from my home state of Oklahoma. He's the Attorney General in Oklahoma. And what I know about him from Okies is that he's very well liked in his home state. That's the home to Devon Energy. Which the left will say that he's their henchman, that the allegations are that he's let the oil and gas lobbyists write the proposals and the refutations that he has gone up against the EPA with. That's great. I mean, you want your client. If you're representing your client, you want your client's information to be what you bring to the table whenever you're going up against the most bloated of all the agencies.
Sure. And that reminds me a little bit about how the former VP of Blue Cross wrote the ACA. So,
yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah. Oh, and I also am sort of amused at the Rick Perry possibility. The joke is right now that he misnamed the Department of Energy at some point in his history, and then whenever he talked about it again, said that he thought it should be eliminated. So now he's being considered as Secretary of Energy. So I find that really interesting too.
Who's the guy? I can't remember the name. He's looking at for FCC, head of the FCC.
Peter Thiel?
Okay. Was it Peter Thiel?
Now I'm not remembering who it is.
He was definitely talking to Peter Thiel, and that was exciting because I'm
Yeah.
a big Peter Thiel fan. But no, apparently the gentleman who is going to be potentially running the FCC has already said on the record that he doesn't see any reason for about 80% of what they do.
That's what we want to hear, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think we need to be spending our federal resources on tracking down, pirate radio stations
Right.
anymore. Now
Right.
that everybody can have a website anytime they want to. So that was interesting as well. I thought that a lot of these picks really indicate a sense of of making the load of the federal government lighter, which I think
Right.
unless you're just in love with the state, that's going to be music to your ears.
Yeah, trim the fat.
Yes, exactly. Well, let's move on to kind of the thing that brought us all together. We started off as this ragtag bunch of people that didn't even know each other very well because we don't really have any media space or any
Right.
society space in the Pacific Northwest. The GOP looked at us funny.
That's putting it kindly.
Well, when they even pretended to notice that we were there at all.
Yes.
And, of course, the obvious response from the Bernie people and the Hillary people on the left. But, I'm not sure if I ever heard you kind of explain your true origins of when you got involved with Donald Trump politics.
Well, I've always been fascinated by Donald Trump, and I remember I was up in Glacier, Washington, 4th of July weekend of 2015, and staying at a little ski resort up there, getting away from the fireworks, and ran into a couple of guys from Seattle, and we started talking politics, and we started talking about Donald Trump and Carly Fiorina. That's who they liked. And so we had a whole weekend of a long conversation, and just that initial conversation, and I kept thinking about it, and we kept talking. I had an intuition. I had a feeling this is something big, and this is something real, and I want to get involved. And as you know, we all sent our names into the national website, and months went by before we heard anything. But that was my genesis with stepping into this campaign, was just submitting my name to the website like everybody else did, the national website like everyone else did. And I think it must have been around end of March when I got a phone call from another grassroots organizer that was just reaching out to the people that were in the area and getting together. And I think the first time I met you must have been at the Marriott, I'm thinking, the Marriott
Spring Hill
Hotel.
Suites, downtown Seattle.
Yeah. As a presentation, and I didn't really know anybody else there.
I still had my long hair, and I didn't have my
That's
suit
right.
yet.
That's right. You still had your long hair.
Yeah, I looked a bit different. That was an interesting night. I definitely got the sense, because I've done activism work down in LA. I've done it all over the country for different things. And when I got to that room, it just felt like the first day of class when nobody knows each other and everyone's just looking around like, what the heck is this?
And everybody looks really different.
Yeah.
Nobody looks like they belong together, like they would hang out with each other necessarily, or even speak the same language.
I'll show the photo on our YouTube episode, but when you look at the photo, it's like you've got all kinds of different ethnic backgrounds. You've got probably more women than men.
There were more women than men there, for sure.
Well, that wasn't uncommon, though, as you know.
Yeah,
I mean,
contrary to popular belief.
That was always my ace in the hole whenever I had somebody who I actually felt like spending time on who didn't understand what we were doing.
Yeah.
And I would say, all right, here's the thing. I run a Donald Trump office in Seattle, and most of my volunteers are female and or immigrants.
Yeah.
And and I would just take a step back and just wait until they're like mind blew. What?
Yeah.
And then they would try to, on the spot, concoct some kind of theory to explain this, which flew in the face of everything they'd been hearing on CNN, et cetera. But yeah, I mean, that's the fact. They had our movement profiled as white men, which I didn't see very many of those at all.
Not too many.
Really? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not where we were. Not in the Pacific Northwest anyways. And I just kept seeing time and time again a completely different group of people than what we were being described as on TV. It really reminded me of Occupy Seattle because I spent a lot of time down there when Occupy Seattle formed up. I was fascinated by this this kind of spontaneous formation of all these people that came together, and they were living down there. And there were kids hanging out, reading the Constitution and trying to figure out this and that, and reading Karl Marx and everything. It was an interesting scene. But these media types would come down there, and they would spend 5-10 minutes, grab the most hippie looking person they could find, and put them in front of the screen. And yeah, there were street kids down there. There was college students. There was people that were, full-time employees, etc. It was just a really mixed bag. But they would come in, the press would come in and just grab some stereotypical looking person, interview him for 5 minutes and go, okay, yeah, it's a bunch of unemployed degenerates down here. Back to you, Scott. And then that was like the end of the report. It wasn't anything like how it was being characterized. And I got the sense that these were different groups of people everywhere you went. It was an idea. It wasn't an archetype. There was no standard Occupy person.
Right.
And I think the same thing is very true about the group that we were involved with that helped to elect President Donald J. Trump. There was not there wasn't a commonality.
There was no common denominator.
Yeah.
Except for dissatisfied and a bit, maybe a bit desperate for something to happen different.
I can think of one common thread, and that's that they stopped believing what the mainstream media was telling them.
You're right. That would be the one common denominator.
Yeah.
Is that they could see through the narrative, the false narrative that was being pushed down their throats. Yeah.
Yeah. So we came together, and I'm given this task to first. I accept the job to work for Donald J. Trump for President Incorporated, and that was interesting in and of itself. And then I get tasked with, okay, go open up an office in Seattle. And I'm just thinking to myself, okay, well, why don't you just throw me into a pit of sharks with laser beams attached to their heads? Because that would probably be an easier job than what we were dealing with. Now, tell me a little bit about how it's been for you since we've become, public enemy number one in this city.
I've had to be really careful. I own a business. I have a lot of clients. We have probably a minimum of 150 clients per week. So my public persona has had to be very different than my private persona. And going a little bit deep with that, even my private persona has had to become pretty guarded. It's definitely changed. My life has definitely changed. But in order to protect my business, I've had to live a duplicitous life, and I probably will continue to have to live it that way. Because if anyone were to find out, it would probably lose business. And that's maybe for now. I mean, maybe when they can no longer refute the successes that we're getting ready to have, then I won't have to live in the shadows anymore. But it's definitely been difficult. I haven't had anyone other than my immediate family and a couple of friends to talk to, and I've definitely lost friends. And not just Facebook friends, like real friends. I've definitely lost some real friends. And it's hurtful. But at the same time, what I've gained are some true friends and some true allies in what is, I think, the most important era that we're entering into in our lifetimes. And so that's okay. It's okay that these other people had to fall by the wayside because we have some important work to do.
Absolutely. I remember when I first moved to Seattle. Of course, I love the city. I went to high school here. I went to high school in Auburn. And when I came back, I couldn't wait to be back in Seattle, and I was so happy to be back in Seattle. And I really didn't have any very negative, pronounced opinions of liberals, of people on the left. Of course, you hear the conservative media folks, or liberals this, liberals that, and I'm just like, okay, whatever, So they're just kind of harmless. Like they're, they want nice things. They're pushing for nice things. They're not that big of a deal. And I got caught up in it. I mean, at a certain point, I was a John Kerry supporter, so I've been all over the map politically.
Really?
Oh yeah. I mean, that was my guy, and then it was very, very anti George W. Bush. I didn't want any part of what he was doing. So yeah, I've really run the gamut. Still technically registered as libertarian, but I came here rather neutral. I came here with an open mind and really wanted to just fit into my new city and kind of met these great people. But then here and there, the conversations started happening where it was an assumption that everybody in the room was of like mind.
Oh, yes.
That everybody in the room was a progressive or a Democrat or kind of part of this type of thinking.
Yes.
And there was no sense at all that anyone here in Seattle could possibly be anything other than from this school of thought, this particular school of thought. And I just kind of, when it first started happening, I went, okay, well, that's a little bit weird. Like, in my experience, at least somebody would kind of get a sense for who's in the room or kind of put feelers out before they started making really offensive comments about a pretty large group of people. And it kept happening, and I sort of entered that sort of state where you're just kind of confusing. Something's wrong, but you don't can't quite put your finger on it. And I think I was in that state at the point at which I started working for the campaign. I gained so much clarity through this process.
Yes.
I really saw what the deal was on the other side, and the fact that I'm not allowed to have an opinion. I'm not even, my viewpoint is not valid because I don't agree with 95% of Seattle.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is. At some point, we should try to figure out exactly what the percentages are. I mean, I know that we did well in the primaries here, but it changed for me once I realized that I was dealing with folks who would rather take away my voice completely.
Yes. And
not allow me any seat at the table. And I just felt like that was the most un-American thing I could imagine.
Yeah.
In a place where, and I'm a constitutionalist, and I haven't completely confirmed this, but family lore is that we're related to one of the signers. So this has been a big deal for me all my life. Just the idea of everybody gets a seat at the table. This is a melting pot. This is a place where, anyone can come and make it, and you can do anything you want to as long as you're not bothering other people. Well, it turns out in our beautiful city that I bet you if we put on Trump hats right now and just went walking down through, some of the bars and whatnot, we would have 15, 20 really nasty things that have happened to us in the first, half an hour, let's say.
Oh, absolutely.
And I don't think other people around the country really understand how bad it is. I've talked to some friends in Denver, which is fairly liberal. And I tell them stories and I'm like, and they can't believe it. They're like, wow, it's that bad. Yes, yes, it's
it
that
is.
bad.
It's that bad.
There's a reason why we're calling this show the Foxhole Report.
Right.
It's not an accident. It's because we are literally pinned down here. We can't even go out. We can't hold an event. Could we go out and hold a rally in Westlake Center? What would happen to us?
Oh, no way. Donald Trump couldn't even land his plane here.
That's right.
Back in June.
That's
you remember?
Right.
They wouldn't let him land his freaking plane in Seattle.
The King County administrator, I don't know if I ever got the name of the exact person.
We'll find out.
Yeah, that'll be a nice research project.
Yeah.
We'll go roast that guy. Or female. I don't know who it was. But apparently when Donald Trump had lined up this incredible rally he was going to do at Boeing Field in a secure hangar, everything was taken care of. All the Trump folks were comforted because they realized they wouldn't have to encounter, bloodthirsty, violent individuals just to go and support their political candidate. Everything was lined up. We were all excited. And then we get the news in the office, it's not going to happen. And then we find out it's because the King County administrator, who was in charge of issuing permits for planes landing, figured out he held the power to stop the entire thing.
Yeah.
And so that's why the rally was held 3 hours north in Linden.
And we didn't get to go.
And we didn't get to go.
Yeah.
We had a fun little party. We had some nice pizza.
We had a nice party, and we ended up meeting some great folks who also couldn't make it up there. So it all worked out. But still, the point is that some city administrator took it upon themselves to make sure that they were in control.
Right. Yeah. So for those of you in the rest of the country, if you want to know how bad it is here, that's how bad it is.
Yeah. And who's paying that city administrator's salary? Oh, wait. That's right. You and me. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm going to send him a fruit basket, too.
Make sure there's a lot of nut cakes in there.
Make sure there's lots of interesting surprises. But yeah, we persevered, we fought through, and I was really impressed with the group of folks that we wound up working with on
Amazing people.
Yeah, and just such a like across the boards. He had the one guy who. Like one guy, Tim, his job was like working on stock cars or like funny cars, dragsters. Like he was a dragster mechanic.
Yeah.
Huge Trump guy. Never been interested in politics before in his entire life.
That is probably another really interesting common denominator in a lot of the Trump supporters that we've run across, that they've never been involved in politics before.
Yeah.
These people were first timers in getting involved in any kind of campaign, and a lot of people's their first time to ever vote. And it would be really interesting to find out in this state what percentage of those people were first time voters, because I do know that probably at about mid-October we had an unofficial report from King County Election Board that voter registration was up about 40%. So you can't quite imagine all those people going out and registering to vote for Hillary, that they were that excited about their candidate, especially since they considered a done deal here. So we can only imagine that the large part of that 40% were Trump supporters.
Well, the dead people were really excited to vote for Hillary.
The dead people are always thrilled to get up and vote.
They are all Democrats. I don't know how that works.
Well,
I guess you become a Democrat when you die. That's just that's
how
one of
happens.
the final moments of life is just realizing that you've been a Democrat all along.
That's right.
And from the grave,
you get saved.
You will always vote for the Democratic candidate. That music means I think it's time for us to duck out for a break here for a minute. So
all right.
We'll see you on the other side, everyone. And we're back.
Here we are.
Here we are.
Getting close to Christmas. Couldn't think of a better Christmas present than to be looking at the presidency of Donald J. Trump getting ready to take place. Isn't that the best Christmas present ever that Santa could have given us?
It is going to be a merry, merry Christmas for the 1.2 million Trump voters here in Washington State.
I guess everybody else is getting a lump of coal. Oh, wait, they don't like coal.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, dear.
Coal trains are bad.
Oh, coal barges are worse.
Energy is bad, except for the fact that they use it every day.
To drive their Priuses.
I know.
Oh, you know what? No, that's not entirely true. I do know that in this state, this is one of the only states that we don't use coal to fire the electricity.
Oh, that's true. We just have the hydroelectric dams that are
Right.
stopping all the fish from
salmon,
getting to the
yeah.
places where the Native Americans eat them.
Coal,
So
salmon, I don't know. They're going to have to pick their poison.
yeah,
Bless their hearts.
Yeah, energy is a funny thing. I mean, even with electricity, if you look at the environmental impact on the ways that it was being produced, so even their electric cars are not exactly accomplishing the goals.
How many of them do you think know this?
Well, they're only aware of what they know on MSNBC. So yeah, I would say zero.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
So Kanye.
Oh, Kanye. Bless your little pea-picking heart.
I can't believe he showed up in public, and not only in public, but went to visit Mr. Trump at Trump Tower.
Trump Tower this morning. Yeah.
I was fascinated by that. He he came out. Did you see it? Did you see a clip of when he was on stage?
Back a few weeks ago before he went into
He was
the sanitarium.
immediately whisked off to what one of my more conspiratorial-minded friends called the MK Ultra doctor to have that little mess cleaned up.
So tell me more about this, Bryce.
Well, nobody really
Dirk,
knows.
excuse me, sorry.
The problem with music in terms of major label music at this point is that there is definitely a control structure. You look at Bob Dylan and the way that there were so many dissident artists in the 60s and 70s, and then you look at now and it's like, okay, where'd that go?
Yeah.
And it seems clear to me that there was some sort of perception management that was assigned to the music industry when these people had this huge platform to say whatever they wanted to millions and millions of people. It sounds like the oligarchs got interested in reining those folks in. So, yeah,
Does
I thought it was
Mark Chapman have anything to possibly do with this?
Mark Chapman.
John Lennon's assassin.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, that could have been one. I mean, wow. Now we're getting into the really creepy conspiracy stuff.
Well, that's what because wasn't he friends with the Bush family?
Okay, well, if we want to go down this road,
Might as well.
You have to watch a documentary called Paul McCartney Really Is Dead, which explains the Beatles art from Rubber Soul on, and how
My favorite album.
all of these album covers involved all of these clues because John Lennon didn't want to be held responsible for the cover-up. But apparently, before the Rubber Soul album, Paul McCartney was killed in a car accident and decapitated. And the Queen of England decided that was far too dangerous to allow. So she had MI6 step in, and they told the Beatles, you're going to go on as the Beatles. You're not going to tell anyone about Paul McCartney being killed, and we're going to go find a replacement for Paul McCartney. It's an interesting movie. I don't have any idea if it's true or not, but
I will definitely be looking that up.
Conspiracies.
Love it.
The people that really surprise me the most are the people that seem to think that conspiracies just don't ever happen. Oh, it's a conspiracy theory. Oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist.
Well, those are the people who don't have any real education, I think. I mean, and I don't mean that like in the sense that they don't have a paper degree from a university, but a conspiracy, if you look at the etymology of the word, it just means people who breathe together.
Right. Multiple people conspire
to create profit every day.
Or do whatever it is they want.
Right. Right. It does not have to have nefarious, it doesn't have to be a nefarious term, but we've bought into it as a pejorative as a society.
Well, we bought into the notion that the leaders of our culture were not getting together and making decisions against our best interests behind closed doors. But when you look at what CNN did, which was clearly outlined in the Podesta emails.
Yes.
When they were funneling the debate questions to one candidate, but not the other.
Right.
How is that not a conspiracy?
When they were examining the questions and asking if it was okay before they asked them.
Oh, that's right. Oh, didn't they hit up Hillary's campaign and ask what questions?
Donna Brazil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was at least collusion, and whatever people's idea of conspiracy was, it probably fits into that too.
And I mean, we look at history. I mean, there's everything from the Catalan conspiracy in Rome to, I mean, how do people think that Julius Caesar managed to get assassinated? That's a conspiracy. Conspiracies happen, folks.
Gulf of Tonkin.
Yeah.
I mean, it's out there for those that want to know. So yeah, for anybody that's interested in breaking out of your mainstream media bubble, there is copious amounts of resources out there available to you to actually learn the truth. But the bottom line is, if you're a zero conspiracy theorist, you're probably the craziest person I can think of.
Yeah.
And I have no idea where somebody would arrive at that conclusion.
Me either. I mean, there's the civilization has been built upon one conspiracy and another. I mean, that's how politics advances. That's how hierarchies advance.
And everybody seems to know the rule that absolute power corrupts absolutely.
But yet they believe in the transparency of a government that's taking advantage of them.
But yet no federal government would ever do terrible things to me.
And you know what? Honestly, that's what people believe. That's what my folks back in Oklahoma, my parents' age, whenever my mom tries to tell them things that have been going on, they shake their heads in disbelief, say the government would never do that to us. So we have to remember there is a contingent of people, a large swath of people in this country who do not believe that their government would ever do anything like that.
Right. And I have to say that even though I'm comfortable with the person in power right now because I helped to get him elected, that doesn't change anything in the sense that when there's too much power, regardless of who's holding it right now, it's going to mean bad news if somebody else gets that power later on. And I think that we're seeing a lot of that come to Jesus moment for a lot of these Democrats right now, because they excitedly watched as Obama used his executive pen over and over again to kind of shape the landscape and just sort of operate as a king. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, they're, wait a minute. Now all this stuff is, I'm really uncomfortable with all this power. Oh, all of a sudden.
Well, suddenly it's coming back to bite him in the butt.
Yeah. And you know, if we believed what they believed, that there was just this, uncontrolled rogue billionaire narcissist maniac, then I might be a little bit concerned myself. But if you look at everything he's done, it's kind of, he's sort of cutting off his own power
Yeah.
every which way he turns. He seems to be interested in reducing the amount of power that the federal government holds, which I think is a win for all of us.
Well, that was his entire point, I think, for running his campaign. And I think that's why he waited as long as he did from the time that Pat Nixon told him, he wrote that little letter that he's now going to hang in the Oval Office, telling him that he's going to run a successful presidential campaign someday. I think that's why he held off for as long as he did. There's a number of reasons I think he held off, but that's one of them. To reach a point to where it had gotten as bad as it could possibly get, and that means there's a chance of changing it. He has nothing to gain by this financially, and he's taking $1 as his salary. He's taking so much grief at a point in his life when he should be retiring and enjoying his billions. This is something for him. This is a major sacrifice, and I think that people like you and I can intuit this man is doing this because these are some strongly held beliefs that he has about seeing this country do the right thing and get back on track.
Sure. I think a quote that I saw recently was that he kept waiting and waiting and waiting for somebody else to do what needed to be done.
Yeah.
And nobody did. And so he said, okay, fine.
Because it's awful. It's an awful place to have put oneself.
I can't even imagine. I mean, you look at the stuff that we went through just in our little podunk secret, office
secret bunker,
in Seattle. We didn't get half of it. We didn't get burned down. We didn't get the rest of that stuff. But can you even imagine the kind of death threats and the kind of horrible stuff that you just look at the myriad of assassination claims or people on Twitter seem to feel totally comfortable saying that they plan on assassinating the president of the United States. That used to be something that would get people locked up.
Right. Well, and it still would if it was coming from our side.
Yeah, the double standard, which we will have to navigate for probably quite a while longer. Well, with the short time that we have left, let's talk about the future. I mean, we've got this great point of momentum, and we've got a lot of wonderful people here in the Pacific Northwest. And so what do you think we can do from here on out?
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is reach out to all the folks that we were in contact with over the past year. I mean, there is a few of those people have reached out to me wanting to know if we're still doing anything. And so I think the first thing we do is reach out to those folks, because many of them during this past year had so much to say about their personal experiences, whether it was teachers in high schools, public education, to government workers, to stay-at-home moms. Everyone had an experience that they wanted to share with us about why they were giving up their time, their energy, and their money to help see Donald J. Trump elected as our president. So I think the first thing to do is reach out to those people, because they really are the forgotten men and women of this country, but more than anything, the forgotten men and women of this state. I think if we go back in history, this state is a lot more red streaks going on in this state than people would ever guess now. And we're in the concentrated area of liberal social justice warrior mayhem. But if you get a little ways outside of this county, not so much.
She got 1.6 million in Washington, I think.
Yeah.
And you look at Seattle, is a little over 1 million.
Yeah, it's not much. It's not much.
Seattle by itself probably comprised the lion's share of those votes, I would think.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting. And honestly, when I looked at the state and I looked at the total numbers, in terms of the big picture, it was a lot closer than any of us really thought could be possible. Right. It was only a difference of about 400,000 votes in the state. And
we would have loved to have flipped the state. I mean, that was definitely our intention of flipping the state. And so we've got a lot of things to look at here. I think we pulled about 38%. We were hoping for a lot higher than that. So there's still a lot of question marks out there about what actually might be going on here. I think part of it is that we had a non-compliant GOP contingent here that didn't help us a whole lot.
Sure, yeah, the cruise bots that would not give up.
I think that they're feeling the effects of that now. A lot of their candidates didn't win. I think they're feeling the effects of pushing back against the momentum of the people. So, but despite all that, 1.2 million people in the state. That's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people.
And so the first thing we need to do is reach out to those folks and let them know that they have a platform here with us, and that their voices will be heard. And what we're going to do is make a unified voice, because we know that we have the ear of our president-elect, and we're going to make it known.
That's right. Well, and as Lori said, we intend to make this a place for all of you, because right now the Trump voter doesn't really have a place to go.
Yeah.
The GOP, the previously established spaces for them. I mean, they don't. We're not the same folks. We're not GOP types.
And our supporters aren't either.
No.
I just remember the Everett rally back in August, and I was outside. I walked about 8 blocks, going through the lines, talking to people, and there were 16,000 people there. And so many of those people said it's the first time they've ever voted. So many of those people said it's the first time they've ever been involved in politics. So those are the people that we're trying to reach out to let them know that they have a place to have their voices heard.
Sure.
They went out of their way. Now we're going out of our way to make sure that they get their voices heard.
Yeah, and as a bloc, again, we're dealing with an opposition that's sort of reeling and then just on their heels right now.
Yeah.
And I think this is a time where if we can stay together and really focus our strength, there's a lot of cool things that we could get done in the state of Washington.
There's some amazing things that we can get done. I mean, that's the reason that we failed for as many times as we have failed in the past, is that once our candidate won, we just went back to work instead of staying at work. So what we need to do right now is keep winning. We've won. We need to stay together and keep winning.
Keep the pressure on.
That's right.
So what's the next thing? I think we've got Inauguration Day is looking pretty exciting.
It's coming right up.
For the city of Seattle, because we will have one Milo Yiannopoulos.
Ooh, that's right.
Making his appearance at University of Washington.
We can only imagine.
And the UW College Republicans have all the info on that. I wish I had it in front of me. I would read it off right now, but we will post that as a graphic.
Just know that it's January 20th. At the University of Washington.
On Inauguration Day, the liberals have declared war on us. ISIS have declared war on us. It's going to be an interesting day, January 20th. And quite frankly, I've kind of considered what it would be like to go out to D.C. and spend all that money and go out there and be part of that. And it sounds pretty neat. But I think I'd rather be in front of Milo.
It's going to be so much fun.
That is the place to be.
Yeah.
I mean, he's dropping him right into the middle of the fire, and like you see, what a fearless warrior he is. Did you see the video of last week when he went and protested himself at his event?
No, I didn't see that.
Milo drew up a big sign that said "Milo sucks," and he explained that by saying, "Oh, well, that's true. Any way you look at it." So then he goes and joins this protest in front of his event with the sign and a mask on his face. And then he takes off the mask. And of course, all the Milo fans go crazy and start crowding around him. And then he just kind of marches
awesome.
into the event. I have never seen anything like that.
I love it. I turned my 20-year-old nephew, who's a Marine at Presidio, came and visited me for Thanksgiving, and he voted for Trump, but he didn't know about Milo. I turned him on to Milo, and I got a text from him today that said, "I can't stop watching Milo Yiannopoulos." I'm like, you're supposed to be studying Pashto.
I can't either. When Milo went away for 2 weeks after the election, when he was kind of snuggling up to his new boyfriend, apparently, and I had this void that just I could not fill with anything. But we are at the end of our time today, and thank you, Lori, for coming down. I look forward to doing this on a regular basis. Yeah, it's going to be really fun. Everybody can go to redstreakmedia.us and go to our YouTube channel. You can subscribe. There's lots of ways to plug in, but we are not going anywhere. We're going to be here for a long time.
We can't wait for you to join us.
We're going to have all of your MAGA-related news as we all do our parts to make America great again.
Let's keep winning.